If people could come in and take their seats, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker here for Monday, the Monday session of this conference. What we're going to do is we're going to have a talk, and then there's going to be opportunity for questions. And our procedure is going to be to, if you'd like to ask a question, I have a few already in hand, then raise your hand and someone will bring you an index card for your question, and then I'll ask Tucker Carlson the question. That seems to be the best way to proceed. You know, I was kind of Trump skeptical in early 2016, and my colleague Mark Bauerlein said, "Hey, Rusty, you really need to watch this YouTube video." Some liberal put together what he thought was the most egregious statements of the candidate Trump during his rallies, and so I dutifully watched this video, and I remember lying down on the floor of my living room, watching it on my laptop, and Trump said in one of his, apparently says it often in his rallies during that campaign, "Our country is being run by very stupid people." And I thought, oh, come on. I mean, we're talking about well-credentialed people, very intelligent people. And then I thought, declining life expectancy, the economic hollowing out of middle-class life in America, foreign wars that have cost us greatly in blood and treasure and squandered our reputation abroad. You know, maybe Trump is actually taking the least pejorative option, that our leadership class is ignorant rather than malign and malicious. And I thought last night when Peter Thiel made his observations about how the universities in STEM aren't as good as they say they are, if we look at the last 30 years, we've got a president that succeeded Ronald Reagan, Yale, and then another president, Georgetown, Yale, and then another president, Yale, and then another president, Columbia and Harvard. And I wonder whether our elite universities can't also be said to have failed miserably in training a leadership class actually capable of running our country. And a fish rots from the head down, and our speaker at midday here, Tucker Carlson, has confronted our leadership class left and our leadership class right with their failures. And he has done so over the last year with intelligence, certainly with persistence, and also, as many of us know, with great courage in the face of many attempts to shut him down. I would submit that this has been and will continue to be a great service that he renders to our nation, and for which I believe he will be remembered and honored. And so therefore, it's my great honor to introduce Tucker Carlson as our keynote speaker.
Thank you, Rusty. I don't know if I'll be remembered and honored. It's pretty funny. I was actually thinking this morning of a line, and I can't remember who first uttered it, someone far less impressive than you would imagine, but it's so true, it's never left my mind. In the end, all graves go unvisited. I think that a lot as I try to keep things in perspective. Excuse me, I've been in rural Maine for 6 weeks, during which time I decided to quit using nicotine after 36 years of avid use. So the combination, I don't know if you should applaud. Now I have to go on a diet, but whatever. But the combination of those two things has left me more scattered than ever. I went for a run this morning and I was like, I'm going to sort of think through what I'm going to say today. And then by the end, I couldn't remember why I'd gone for a run in the first place. So anyway, Apparently we have a system, I guess Rusty just said, for questions. I really like a colloquy since I'm in the soliloquy business, and hearing myself talk becomes tiresome, even to me after a while. So I'd rather have a conversation. So I will make this short and skip right to that. And by the way, if you can't control yourself, if you have some burning desire to heckle, most people hate it. I sort of enjoy it. I mean, I work in cable news, so it's not like you're going to hurt my feelings. And I did see a couple people in the audience I know don't like me, so now's your chance. Otherwise, we'll wait for the Q&A. But anyway, so I guess the structure that occurred this morning is, since unlike so many in this room, I'm not any sort of intellectual or particularly well-educated or a systematic thinker in any sense, it might just be better to do what I do and bring you a report from the life that I live, the signature feature of which is that I actually have contact with the people the rest of us complain about quite a bit. And I have really learned a lot in the past 2.5, almost 3 years of doing this current gig. So I've been in this job, the same kind of job, for like 20 years, where you're debating the other side. I was on a show called Crossfire for a long time. And it's hard to overstate the difference in the conversation now. It's not at all the same experience, at all. 20 years ago, we would have sort of vigorous debates, what was called vigorous debates, and they were sort of vigorous debates, but they were basically gentlemanly, and they were rooted in common assumptions. Both sides agreed on more than they disagreed on, it turned out, and that's why you were able to kind of get together after the show and have dinner, not because you were cynical or didn't believe what you said, but because, again, the union set of beliefs was pretty large. That's really changed. So here are 3 things that I have learned about the left over the past couple of years. And I think they go, since this is a conference about nationalism, they might help explain the resistance to nationalism. It wouldn't seem obvious that there would be much. There's nothing inherently wrong with nationalism. In fact, it should be the default setting for a nation, right? I mean, by definition. But there are, as you well know, and if there weren't, this conference wouldn't be occurring, there are powerful forces who are opposed to it. And so the question, which is too rarely asked, is sort of why? And I'm not sure I have an answer, but here are 3 observations that might help fill in the blanks. The first and the most shocking to me is, and this is something that I've said like 30 times on my show, but every time I say it, it's like I'm bewildered that I'm saying it. The main threat to your ability to live your life as you choose does not come from the government anymore, but comes from the private sector. I can't believe I'm saying that as someone who really grew up in this city. My father worked for the government, was engaged day to day in fighting the Cold War. And maybe because of that, I was trained from the youngest age, from a pup, to believe that the threats to liberty came from government, of course, because the Soviet Union was our model. The force that was clamping down, was darkening half of the world and crushing religious expression and the market, was a government, the Soviet government, and all the satellites in China. And so it really took a huge amount of evidence, wagging right in my face, not being the brightest person in DC, to realize that in 2019, the threat to the things that I want to do and the things that I want to say, the threat to my conscience, to the ability to believe what I choose to believe, and that's the fundamental right, that those threats really come primarily from companies and not from the federal government. And this even now is a controversial statement. I'm sure there are libertarians, well, libertarians already hate me. It's requited, trust me. But even non-libertarian conservatives almost can't form the words because they've been trained for so long not to believe that, but the evidence is absolutely overwhelming. And not just in sort of the small annoying ways, the fact that America's most popular cookie, the Oreo, now has, a statement of, gender politics on it. Well, I'm not joking. I would need reading glasses to read it, but apparently, since I'm 50, apparently all new Oreos have the question, what's your pronoun? So, this is the kind of story that cable news thrives on. It'll be like, oh, that's so annoying, they're so crazy. Take 3 steps back, what's actually happening? a large American company is committing a pretty brazen act of propaganda aimed at your kids. And the message is that the binary gender scheme, which we were taught in biology class in 7th grade, is no longer operative. This is basically a kind of profound statement against nature. And you have to kind of ask yourself, like, is the federal government doing that? No. Mondelez is doing that. Oreo is doing that. Multiply that times every Fortune 500 company in America, 500, and you have the state of play. The coercive, okay, so to which libertarians will say, well, I mean, yeah, if you don't like it, start your own Oreo company. Okay? I guess. And we can argue, or, go Nilla wafer or whatever. There's no sort of way to imprint messages on a Nilla wafer, get it, okay? But that's not really an operative option in a world of monopoly power. And I know that, I think Arthur Millick is speaking later on this, maybe Orrin Cass, but probably a bunch of people are going to address this in much deeper detail and much more capably than I'm going to now. But let me just say, you can't create your own Google. And if you have a company, and we do, through which all human information in English flows, through a choke point that we can't control, there's no democratic way of controlling, you have the potential, well, first of all, you have more power vested in a smaller number of hands than at any time in American history, A. And that itself is ominous and should make all of us, cast aside any kind of ideology or theology or whatever, just look at that straight in the face. Are you comfortable with that? You shouldn't be. Of course you're not comfortable with it. It's terrifying. Let's stop lying to ourselves. It's awful, all right? And that's where we are. But think through for 5 minutes the potential risks, the threats from that, and they're really obvious. It's like they could make whole ideas disappear. And in fact, there's some evidence that they're working to do that. And as Orwell noted, once you take away the words, you take away people's ability to think about the concepts, right? You can't have an idea if you don't have the words to express it. And so the person in charge of the words really has the power over your mind. And they do. And the pushback from our elected officials has been basically zero. Now, I'm not going to go on a long Jeremiad about why. I think you know why, because they're corrupt. Literally, the antitrust think tank in Washington takes money from Google. No, I'm not. And it has a name, something like, it's a very literal name. It's like antitrust think tank. And if you go through their list of donors, yeah, Google's on there. So that doesn't seem to bother anyone on the left. Well, why? Because they're benefiting from J.D. Vance, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry. I'm so nearsighted that people loom out of the darkness at me. That doesn't bother anyone on the left, of course, because these are the shock troops for their politics, of course, because they're in alliance with the progressive left. It should bother people on the right, but it doesn't, because again, their minds are captive to an antiquated way of looking at the world, the build your own Google way. So I just think, again, this is something that I could go on about to the point where you'd ask me to stop, but I would stop on this point. Ponder this. Retrain your mind to acknowledge the things that are right in front of you, that are obvious. It's one of the upsides, there are many downsides, I will say, to Trump, but one of the upsides is the Trump election was so shocking, so unlikely. So we elected Donald Trump president, huh? We all pretend, oh, of course we did. Yeah, okay, yeah. It was so shocking that it did cause some significant percentage of people to say, wait a second, if that can happen, like, what else is true? In other words, like, if the Loch Ness Monster is real, what about the Yeti? I'm serious. Weirdly, the Trump election spurred in me a kind of reassessment of UFOs. We've done a consistent series. No, I'm not. I'm serious. And it turns out, like, they're real. It had never occurred to me. I spent my entire life making fun of people who had unauthorized thoughts. I thought I was a free thinker. As all, young people flatter themselves. Of course, almost all fascists are under 30, in case you haven't noticed. As especially true in the press corps. And they think of themselves as really sort of the cutting edge. I'm radical. And that's why if you think something you're not allowed to think, I'll punch you in the face. Right. Well, all young people, the truth is, are a kind of variety of that, including me. And the beauty of Trump was, once he showed up, you're like, okay. Well, so this happened. I guess I can think whatever I want. So maybe it's time to traipse up to the mental attic and see what's in storage. And what I realized was there was all this junk up there, moldering, that I'd assumed was still sort of fresh and bright and worth keeping. You really accumulate all kinds of ideas, most of which aren't actually ideas, they're just tics. And you don't realize that you have them. And Trump really, and it wasn't, of course, just me, but it was a lot of people, almost all of them were in this room, actually, who went up there and they're like, is it still true? And so what I encourage myself to do every single day, this is one thing I am faithful about, is I really encourage myself to just try to look clearly, like what is actually happening? I mean, the forces of lying have definitely increased. They've gotten louder anyway. It's like everyone's lying. It's all propaganda. So disregard all of it. Put your earphones on to white noise and just look around. And who are the good guys and who are the bad guys? I'm serious. And a lot of the people we've been told are good guys are not at all. Actually, some of them are the worst guys. I'll let you figure out who. Sorry, I got carried away. Okay, so that's the first observation. The second observation I would make is, and I'll be short with this, but it's another one of my obsessions, is that it's all a kind of Freudian projection. Like whatever they say you're doing is precisely what they're doing. And again, because I'm not a super genius, it took a long time to figure this out. And I really think Antifa was maybe the moment where I figured it out. It's the guys who are literally armed with steel bars and have black masks on are calling other people fascist. And I'm like, so of course you go immediately to the cliche, that's Orwellian. No, actually it's Freudian. It really is. The things I fear about myself, I transfer onto you. And once you understand that, it really is the Rosetta Stone for their behavior, amazingly. It's true for virtually everything. And if you're me, specifically me, the most bewildering of all is you're a racist. You're a racist, which it's like, I wake up, I open my door to get the paper. You're a racist. And I guess at this point, I probably just admit it. But I actually not. And I make the opposite, I make an affirmative case against racism like all the time on my show. Or for less race consciousness anyway. It's such a boring subject. It's such a dead end. It can't be fixed. It can't be changed. No, I'm serious. So it's not even that interesting. It's not interesting to me anyway. It's not the America that I grew up in. I'm not being self-righteous about it. I'm not saying I'm above nothing. Trust me. One of the things you realize as you age is that you really are pretty loathsome. As my father, this is vulgar, excuse me, my father, who was a genuinely wise man, I had dinner with him last night. He always used to say, when we were little, I mean like third grade, my brother Amit always said, boys, the root of all wisdom is knowing what an asshole you are. Gee, Pop! He would always say that. And it was only in middle age that I realized totally how true that was. So I'm not getting up and be like, I'm really not a racist. Okay, please spare me. What I'm just saying is it's amazing that the people who are so focused on the subject of race are the ones who are denouncing everyone else as racist. And then you realize it's not amazing, because it's true of literally everything they say. Because it's not actually a matter of trying to convince you of their program. It really is a very specific and recognizable psychological syndrome, right? I remember the day that Bill Kristol, of all people, called me a racist, and I was like, really? Bill Kristol? And I was, oh, of course. Of course. It fits. Anyway, so just keep that in mind. And then I guess the last point I would make, which is worth brooding about, is that, and I don't want to believe this, and by the way, I hope I'm wrong, and perhaps I am. But from where I stand right now, it seems pretty clear to me that they're not interested in peaceful coexistence. And by temperament, I just reject that. I really am liberal. I'm literally an Episcopalian. Still practicing, amazingly. But I am liberal by temperament. It would never occur to me to choose my friends by their political beliefs. It would just never occur to me, ever. Nor would it ever occur to me to try to control someone. As much as I despise libertarians, and I really, really do, I mean that. I also kind of am one. I am functionally in a lot of ways libertarian. I'm just not that interested in other people doing their weird thing. Go crazy. It's just how I feel. I probably shouldn't feel that way, but I do. They don't feel that way. They don't. So if you were, and someday I'm going to do this if I have time, it'd be interesting to go down to like the most remote county in Alabama and interview just a cross-section of people at the Hardys, just 25 people, and ask them what they think of the personal sexual practices of the residents of Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and B, how often they think of it. How much of your disk space does this occupy? How many hours a week, estimated, do you spend seething about what they're doing in the sack? 1,500 miles from here. And I'm pretty sure you would find right around 0 people would even understand the question. It just wouldn't compute. Brooklyn, huh? I don't know. Probably something weird, right? Yep, something weird, for sure. All right. That's in New York City, right? Yep, well, there you go. Would you like to pass a law to prevent them from doing that weird stuff? Huh? Who are you anyway? No. And I mean all of them elders at the local Antioch Baptist Church. Evangelicals 100%. And they would tell you no. And then of course, the second half. Go to Williamsburg. And what do you think of the people of, Dothan County, Alabama? You know that over 50% of them are against gay marriage? What? I was just thinking about that this morning. We should kill them. They lay awake at night thinking that somewhere in this country there is somebody who's not fully on board with the program. And by on board with the program, I don't just mean is disobeying. I don't mean a county clerk is refusing to sign a marriage certificate. That's a real argument. I get it, no matter what side you're on. No, they mean someone who, in his heart secretly, is traipsing down to the basement after dinner and communicating by shortwave with someone else who disagrees. And that's unacceptable. And we're going to root that person out, and we're going to fix that person. In fact, you know what we're going to do? We're going to re-educate that person. Yes, these impulses are universal. Yes, they are. There's a reason that happened. Because this is an evangelical faith, is what I'm saying. The progressive faith is an evangelical faith. It's a proselytizing faith. And that's exactly what it is. And of course, and you know why. I can see there are religious people in this. Of course you know why. Because you can't, you can remove religion, but you can't remove the religious impulse. Because it's inborn, it's innate. It can't be taken out. So it'll just be redirected to something even. Do you think the resurrection's implausible? Let me tell you about woke politics. Not only is it way more destructive, it's like 100% dumber. okay? But that's what it is. It's just a replacement, obviously. But we should keep that in mind. And by we, I'm not even sure who I'm talking about. I don't know, and I hope if this conference accomplishes anything, it's to explain what it means to be conservative or nationalist. I don't even know, I've lost track. But whatever they're for, I'm against that. That's kind of how I'm thinking of it right now. I'm absolutely against that. And I'm also, and I'll stop with this, I'm also prone, and I bet many of you are the same, I'm prone to lie to myself about it. And I just want to be absolutely clear, because I know there's a TV camera there. I want to be really clear. I'm still for living with people I disagree with. I will always be for that. I will always be for pluralism. I will always be for intellectual diversity, always. I'll always be happy to have dinner with someone who doesn't share my views. My only point is, and that will never change, I will not allow that to change, because I think you become something less than you should be when you allow those impulses to take over. But the point is, they just disagree. And you can imagine they're just like you, but they're not. So keep that in mind. Anyway, thank you so much for enduring that, and I'm happy to take your hostile questions.
As the voice of the audience, question number one.
Oh.
What is the most important thought we still haven't given ourselves permission to think? or okay, maybe let's make it easier. What is the most important thought we haven't given ourselves permission to say out loud?
I probably have said it out loud.
I know that's a trick question.
Whatever it is.
I know that's a trick question.
The thing that I go back to, and I'm not even sure that, it's just not like spine-tinglingly controversial, but it's almost never said. Countries don't hang together just because. The natural state of man is not progress. That's like a complete lie. Anyone know what the Bronze Age collapse was? Yeah, okay, so the one person. So the Bronze Age collapse was, there was a dark age before the Dark Ages, right? So it was about 1500 BC.
Well, really around
1200 BC, okay. I knew it, look, I bow to superior knowledge. When basically the sum total of human knowledge disappeared, and we're not quite sure, we're still trying to kind of figure out, we may never know. But it mirrored very much the Dark Ages. By the way, do you know how medieval Europe, and by the way, all the way into Levant, the medieval world, got lead, the substance lead, for pipes and cooking and later for ammunition? They took it from Roman ruins. That was the sole source of it, from Roman ruins. Because the technology, which is not complex technology, required to mine lead and separate it from silver or zinc or whatever, because it's an alloy usually, was lost. No one had any idea how to do it. Only for like 1,000 years, not a big deal. So I guess, what's the point? The point is that there's no reason that this should continue apace on the trajectory it's currently on. There's no reason that shouldn't happen again. It's happened at least twice, probably happened more than that. But by its nature, we don't know, right? So what's the point? The point is, what does it take to hold a country together, particularly a country in which there's no majority, right? Where there's no obvious thing that holds people together, not even history, because the demographics change so much. I'm not against that, by the way. I'm not against, there's nothing inherently bad about rapid demographic change. And I'm not, or immoral, I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that it makes it even more important for the people in charge to think through, like, what does hold the country together? What do we have in common as Americans? If a war were to break out, why would we all fight? And what are we fighting for? What is this country? What does it mean? Is it just the sum total of commerce? Is it the GDP? Is it something more than that? These are not only interesting academic questions, they're vital practical questions. Because if you don't answer them, the country will actually fall apart for real. That's not a right-wing point, it's an obvious point. And it's a measure of how unbelievably stupid, and I mean that like literally stupid, like low IQ stupid, bovine stupid, the people in charge are, that they're not waking up in the middle of the night and thinking, holy smokes, clearly the society is becoming a lot more volatile. How do we calm things down? How do we keep it strong? And nobody is, like literally nobody is. So I would say pressing that question, boy, we've pressed it a lot. You know, it's not again, I just made a case for diversity. But the idea that diversity is our strength, okay, tell me how. Is that true in your marriage? I'm serious. Is it? And I'm sure, I know there are a bunch of reporters here, and screw you, just ahead of time. But I know they're gonna be like, oh, Carlson comes out against diversity. I'm not coming out against diversity at all. I like diversity, actually. Just don't lie to me about it. Just don't lie, just stop lying. How's that? And why don't you explain how it works? If you're gonna make it our national motto, don't you owe me? And speak slowly so I can understand. How does it make us stronger? If I married someone who couldn't, I've been married, almost 29 years. If I married someone who couldn't speak English and hated all my views, would that make my marriage stronger? Maybe it would. Tell me how. If you had a military unit comprised of people with literally nothing in common, couldn't communicate, would that be a more effective fighting force? Would it be more cohesive? Like, it's insane, actually. It's the truth. And again, it goes back to what I was implying previously, which is like everything they say is the opposite of what's true. It's like totally bewildering. It's not, and it's what's so bewildering is, and maybe that's why it's so effective, it's so different from the way normal people lie. So I have a ton of children, like Mormon level of children. And I'm not like a great parent or anything, but you just sort of learn by osmosis if you have enough of them. And one of the things that I learned a lot about is lying, because all kids lie, and they lie because they love you. They don't lie because they're bad. No, I'm serious. You don't lie to people you don't care about. When was the last time you lied to an Uber driver? Please. You spill your guts. If you're having an affair, you'll tell him, why do you care? His judgment doesn't strike fear into your heart. It's like it's irrelevant. Anyway, so kids lie because they love you. So you see a lot of lying as a parent, and it's always the same kind of lying. Like, you ate those cookies. There were 10 cookies and they're gone and you ate them. And your kid will be like, oh, I only had 3. What happened to the other 7? I don't know. It's a shade off of the truth. Yes, I ate the cookies, but I didn't eat all 10. Like, that's ridiculous. That's outrageous. I would never do that. Yeah, you did it. Of course you did it. The people who run our country don't lie like that at all. They're like, what? No, you ate the cookies. And you're like, what? No, I didn't eat yeah, you ate the cookies. You freaking cookie eater. That's why you're fat. And after a while, you're like, man, maybe I ate the cookies. They're so aggressive. The dishonesty is so aggressive that it really makes you doubt yourself. It's deep, actually, and terrifying and totalitarian, really, because it doesn't have any basis in reality at all. And that's why it's so effective. Anyway, and that's why they can say diversity is our strength. Anyway.
On the practical side, question number 2. Given that leftists control 99%, this is an estimation, 99% of Silicon Valley, academia, Hollywood, mass media, and so forth, and you've also mentioned, of course, the 500 largest companies in our economy, what gives you hope that our movement can prevail?
Well, I don't have that much hope. I don't. Well, I don't. Because I don't think victory is assured, and I think people who pretend it is are liars. Of course it's not assured. The Bronze Age, Dark Ages, right? 1200 BC. 1200. In that range. Okay, good. You're homeschooled, obviously. Yeah, no, I don't have a ton of hope. I mean, I have every reason to want to believe that. I have every reason to try. It really does, get me out of bed in the morning. I mean it, because I think it's worth it. I guess the one thing that we have, whoever we is exactly, and by the way, can I just pause here and just note that in my day-to-day life, I talk a lot to people on the wacko left, on the sincere, I shouldn't call it the wacko left, the sincere old-fashioned left. And I definitely don't agree with, I'm a social conservative just for the record, like the only pro-life Episcopalian in the world other than my wife. But I really mean it. I sincerely mean it. I'm not kidding at all. There's obviously no upside to being a social conservative. Why would you pretend that? Just so everyone can hate you? So I disagree with, the Jacobin people on a lot of things. But I will say, I've learned in the past couple of years, they're right about a lot. And the one thing they have in common with us, with me anyway, is that they are that they're not partisan. They don't care. They think the Democratic Party is ridiculous. Well, so do I. And I certainly feel that way about the Republican Party. Those people, they represent me on the Hill? Are you joking? I have complete contempt for them, like total contempt for them. Really heartfelt disgust and loathing, actually. So, because, they're, whatever, for the reasons, the reasons. But anyway, the point is, the left kind of feels that way about the Democratic Party. And so some of them, and I won't name names, but some of them are actually kind of honest. And they're looking at what's happening, particularly to the economy, and saying, well, this is like hurting people. Like, what is the point of this, actually? Do you know what I mean? And why this income inequality thing, for example, which we were trained, for my whole life, generations, to think was just a pure invention of some diabolical French intellectual to destroy America, actually is completely real, and it's totally bad. And the more egalitarian a country is, the more stable it is in general. I'm not for forced egalitarianism, obviously, I abhor that. I generally think we should trust markets. Yeah, of course. I'm not a leftist. On the other hand, if you have a society in which a shrinking number of people are getting an expanding percentage of the spoils, like that's a recipe for revolution. Like that's insane, that's not sustainable. And anyone who tells you it is works for the Kochs and can be quiet, because it's not. That's crazy. And there's some people on the left who are willing to say that, and amen. Anybody who tells the truth, I will support, period. I don't care. Because why would I care? I don't work for them. So I guess what I'm saying is, I am given hope by the fact that the overwhelming majority of people don't buy into this at all. They think it's insane. What percent? I saw a poll, Axios. You know what Axios? I'm only dimly aware of what Axios is, but they do these kind of authoritative sounding polls, which I love when I agree with them, as I did this morning. Ilhan Omar, who's a member of Congress from Minnesota, probably the worst person ever to serve in the Congress, I would say. I don't want to beat up on one man. There are a lot of bad people in the Congress, and to her great credit, she's willing to say out loud what a lot of them think. So she does get, I think, credit for being honest about her awful views. But anyway, the point is she's awful, and awful in a specific way. We rescue you from refugee camp. Stop lecturing us about how horrible we are. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, that's fair. So I said that the other day and immediately got threats of a boycott, or we're going to shut you down and you're a racist. Okay, please. And so I see this poll this morning. You know what percentage of Americans who know who Ilhan Omar is approve of her? 9%. 9%. It's hilarious. Go on Twitter, which I'm never on, but occasionally my producers will send me links from people who the aforementioned Bill Kristol, but a lot of other people who you thought were smart or were kind of reasonable, whatever. They're taking up for Ilhan Omar. And that's when you realize that this hothouse world that we live in, all the angry people, they actually really don't represent the majority of the country. Most people are kind of reasonable. They're not especially ideological. They're a little harder to BS than you think they are. And their real interests are kind of basic human interests. You know what I mean? Sort of want to live unmolested, have their kids do a little better than they did. Nothing grand. And they're kind of decent bourgeois people, the overwhelming majority. So that gives me hope. But again, there's no guarantee that the majority has a say in how it's governed. That has absolutely not. Democracy is like this weird little experiment. From the end of the Roman Republic till 20 minutes ago, no democracy. Why is that? Not a good sign, actually. It was such a self-evident idea, then why didn't it exist? Right. Sorry.
Okay, as long as we're talking about Jacobins, this question speaks to that. Is Elizabeth Warren a potential ally for the goals of a national conservative movement?
Yeah, she's a living tragedy. No, I'm serious. Elizabeth Warren wrote one of the best books I've ever read on economics. Ooh, you must be a leftist. I'm not. I'm a father. She wrote a book called The Two-Income Trap with her daughter. It's an amazing book. You should read it. And let me just say, I think Elizabeth Warren's a joke. A race-obsessed, bizarre, identity politics person, silly. I hate that stuff. It's completely a dead end. It's a distraction designed to get the rest of us to stop thinking about who's getting rich from the current arrangement, obviously, right? It's, wah! Pickpocket, right? I mean, duh. Racist! Steal your money. Which is exactly what they're doing, which is why the finance world supports it so assiduously. But Elizabeth Warren's book, the book she wrote with her daughter, makes a revolutionary point, which is the single biggest change to our society got almost no press. And that was the moment it became impossible for the average person to support a family on one income. Had a huge effect, a massive effect on everything. And it really is kind of the key to woke capitalism. You're wondering, like, what is it really about, Facebook's embrace of the left? What is it this is what it's really about. It's about economics. Why are they so in love with abortion? Same thing. It's about economics. When Chelsea Clinton tweets that, the thing about abortion is, the beauty of Roe v. Wade is, since 1973, our GDP has skyrocketed. No, I'm serious. This is an absolutely common argument on the left. Abortion equals economic empowerment. Okay, so what is that argument? Unpack that a little bit. What are they really saying? Well, they're saying that unencumbered by concerns of family and children, women can become obedient servants to global capitalism. Do you know what I mean? Like if I'm picking employees, do I want to pick someone whose first loyalty might be to her kids? No, of course not. I want to pick someone whose first loyalty is to me. So we're not kind of having that conversation. Elizabeth Warren did. So she's making the case that we need to, and we can argue about how, and we should argue about how, but she's making the case that we ought to be working toward a society in which a parent can stay home to raise the kids. Not forever. If you have kids, it's what is it, 6 years? 5 minutes, depends how many kids you have, but it's not a lifetime. The point is most people want that, actually. What's so interesting, and it's a measure of how impoverished our national conversation is, this is never discussed. I've tried to push it. Everyone looks at me like cross-eyed, like, what's that have to do with it? Okay, right. It's the most important thing. And what's so interesting is if you talk to the Republicans on the Hill, which I try not to do, but whenever I do, and they're up there with their pollsters, I'm not going to name names, Frank Luntz, and all the rest, and the pollsters are telling him, you've got this huge problem because your party's too white and the country's becoming less white and you need to win these different, well, it's obviously true, right? It's just a math question. And you need to appeal to Hispanic voters, for example. How do you do that? There's only one way to do that. And that's get way more liberal on immigration. Open up the borders. You will win Hispanic votes if you do that. Morons. What they never do is look at the second order polling, which is Hispanic voters are not for open borders, actually, at all. And it's patronizing. Indeed, it's probably a species of racism to assume that they are. You know what they're really for? Way more than white voters even? Getting to raise their own kids. Do they get to do that? No, they can't, because they can't afford it. Same with African American voters. So it never occurs to the geniuses on the Hill, if you're making a play for non-traditional Republican votes, maybe you should take a non-traditionally Republican position on something, and why wouldn't it be a pro-family position in favor of raising your own children? Why wouldn't you do that? How hard is that? If I were running for president, which obviously I would never, obviously you'd be insane to run for president, I would never do that, and my kids would mutiny if I tried. But if I were talking to someone, if I were advising someone who was running for president, I would say make that the centerpiece of your campaign. Vote for me and you can raise your own kids if you want. We're not forcing you to. But why wouldn't you want? You really think someone else is going to do a better job? Probably not. You really think it's a minor question? Who raises my kids? It's just like, it's one concern among many. No, actually, it's the central question of your life. But that's not how corporate America feels. It's a speed bump on the way to higher productivity and better earnings to them. They don't care at all. I mean, the whole notion of a family is inconvenient to them. And they behave as if it is. And we ought to push back aggressively in their face, immediately, against anything that's a threat to your children. Ought to make you so mad that you swing first and ask questions later. Of course, it's your children. But we don't. We sit passively by and allow Sheryl Sandberg to lecture us about what the ideal family looks like. And the last thing I will say is we have, for some reason, this is how perverse it is, we have for some reason allowed the single unhappiest people in America to control our social policy. That's insane. If you were looking for, I don't know, advice on real estate investment, would you go to a homeless person? No, this is someone with a demonstrable inability to get the real estate market right. If you were looking for someone to manage your 401k, would you go to someone who recently declared bankruptcy? Probably not. And yet we turn to people like the columnist for Teen Vogue or whatever. We turn to the unhappiest people out of a population of J.D. Vance, 330, something like that, in that range. Homeschooler, 330, I think, over 300 million. We affirmatively seek out the people with the most damaged relationships, most alienated from other people, with a demonstrated inability to form long-term, lasting, healthy relationships with any other human being. We turn to those people, we seek them out, the people with the face tattoos, and we're like, how should we run it? Just kind of looking for some advice on my personal life. In fact, you know what? Why don't you tell my kids how they should grow up and what their values should be? In fact, you know what? We're gonna make you headmaster of our private school and then charge everyone 60 grand to go there. Sorry, you have to be an Episcopalian to get that joke. But that's basically what we've done. If you have influence over young people, if you are in any way influencing how people order their personal lives or how families are run, by definition, you should have to pass a series of stringent tests that make carrying the nuclear codes look simple. Because there's nothing more important than that. And we treat it like it's the least important thing. So, to answer your question, Elizabeth Warren's point about families is, in my opinion, the most interesting, the most resonant, the most important point I have read, including all the stuff from the social conservative groups, which I love, but don't have a ton of respect for, honestly. Everything they've written in the past 10 years that I have read, and I've read most of it because I am a social conservative, her book is more important than any of that. That's how I feel.
Okay, another personality question. What do you think of being paired with Ambassador Bolton as a keynote speaker?
I mean, how honest do you want me to be? It made me feel like wanting to go to war. I was willing to fight. No, I mean, it's great. I'm not that guy, as I already said. I disagree with Bolton on everything. But I don't hate him. I don't think he's like a bad person. I allow for the possibility, indeed the likelihood, that people who disagree with me are fine people. I know a lot of them. I have relatives who disagree with me. You know what I mean?
Indeed.
So yeah, that's great. I mean, I believe in that. I don't want to be at a conference where every person is exactly the same. I'm not on the internet. I really dislike the internet intensely. It just empowers the worst people in the world. And so I'm not on it very much. But as I was literally in the car coming here, I got a text from someone who was like, yeah, they're writing about this conference. Are you sure you want to go to those conferences? There are people there you disagree with. It's like, okay. Same is true when my kids are home from school. Like, so what? Anyway.
Okay, this will be the final question.
All right.
What will be our most likely excess or mistake on the right if these changes that you would like to see a move away from libertarianism happen?
Oh, gosh. I mean, how much time do you have? I mean, it's in human nature. I read a statistic, because as I noted at the outset, I live in Maine for 3 months a year in a very rural area. And I once read a stat from the Maine Department of Transportation that said the majority of single-car fatalities in Maine occurred when the driver hit a tree on the opposite side of the road. And the cause of this, of course, and if you live in a rural area you know, is we have soft shoulders. So you are driving along, you feel your wheel gets stuck a little bit in the sand, and you radically overcorrect and hit a tree. And that, to me, is like the best metaphor for American politics there is. It's an endless cycle of ignoring a problem and then overcorrecting. Do you know what I mean? So no one, I think, in television was madder about the opioid epidemic than I was. I mean, we all should be mad about it. It's the main reason life expectancy is in decline, as you noted in your intro. And yet, I think people with stage 4 pancreatic should be able to get opioids. I mean, I do. And now it's getting hard for that. You know what I mean? So everything is a process of correction, overcorrection, whipping back in the other direction. The problem is it's on such a lag because the people running it are, I don't know if they're potheads or what, but they're always 10 years behind. What? It's a problem? Okay. And then by the time they fix it, do you know what I mean? There probably was a point at which, we should think through some sensible way to reform sentencing, because clearly nonviolent offenders don't need to spend life in jail. I mean, it's terrible, actually, and yet we've gotten to a point now where Pete Buttigieg, St. Pete, he's a very holy man, fellow Episcopalian, war hero, God. He the other day says his plan is to let out 50% of all prison inmates. Just 50%, just right off the top. I'll take 50% off the top. And I'm like, well, what 50%? What? Who are these people? You know what I mean? That's actually, that's demented. So what if, we're probably going to get through the first, 10% nonviolent or whatever it is, 30%. But by the time we get to 50%, there are a lot of rapists who are getting out. That's sentencing reform. So that's exactly what I'm talking about. That is a massive overcorrection. I mean, the temptation in my politics, and my politics are evolving all. I don't even have politics. I just have reactions to things, as you can tell. But as people start to understand that, actually, we need a Teddy Roosevelt moment, clearly. The sugar trust is too big, honestly. Let's take it apart. That's going to be ripe for all kinds of abuses. I mean, bureaucratic abuses, which are awful, of course. We're going to make, in effect, in a reaction against libertarianism, we're going to make the DMV a lot bigger. And probably give them guns. And that's bad. But there's kind of no getting around it. I'm not endorsing that. Do you know what I mean? 10 years from now, I'll probably be kind of a little more pro-libertarian than I thought I was. Okay, that's the nature of it. Do you know what I mean? It's like adjusting a shower. Too hot, too cold. Just keep working on it. Thank you so much.
Please join me in thanking Tucker Carlson again. Thank you.